From Southern California, #1 in the nation for yoga studios, and #4 for serial killings, this is Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan. If you have a tip on anything from murder to mayhem to just plain weird things you want Melissa to know about, tell us about it by sending an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You might just hear your tip on the podcast. And now, here's your host, the yoga queen of the forensic scene, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. That's all I got to say about that. More cowbell. So welcome to Just the Tip-Sters, America's favorite podcast covering murder, mayhem, true crime, solved and unsolved murders, yoga, jam recipes, stock market tips. Any tips you have are truly welcome here. We accept email at jttipsters@gmail.com, faxes, carrier pigeons, smoke signals. Any way you want to get it to us, we are down. Say hello, Producer Mark.
Hello, Producer Mark.
It's always exciting to see how you're going to say it. That's the part that is very exciting to me. So we have some fantastic guests coming in the coming weeks that will be here that are awesome. But for now, just me and you, baby. Just me and you.
We gonna make it work.
Producer Mark. You're going to make it work, buddy. I'm just going to talk into this furry sponge here. That's all I'm going to do.
That's what they call me.
That is your new stripper name. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to stage 2. The dance stylings of Furry Sponge. Furry Sponge, ladies and gentlemen. Furry Sponge, let's hear it for him. Put your hands together. So this edition of this beautiful podcast is my homie Chuck Manson, which we have a long history, Chuck and I. I mean, I'm 53, but, you know, it goes back probably maybe even like in utero. I don't know. So I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, Independence, Kentucky, but it was really 10 minutes from Cincinnati. So it was a small town, but close to, you know, a big throbbing metropolis like Cincinnati. So it wasn't like I, you know, lived in a cave. And I decidedly did not live in a cave. It was a lovely house. But I was fascinated by crime. Not a lot in Independence, mostly somebody stealing someone else's wheelbarrow. But I was fascinated by murder, by death, especially what happens when you die. And while other kids in their preteens are hoping to score a tattered, stained copy of Penthouse or Wii or Pig Tits or whatever people like to hide in the woods at their camp, I was angling for a bootleg copy of Helter Skelter at the age of 12-ish. 12, I'm guessing. You know, I can't imagine a place further away from Los Angeles and what was happening than Independence, Kentucky. But news did eventually travel there, and I was fascinated by the case. And I think the sheer number of bodies, as well as what it took for Mr. Manson to be such a compelling guru. So, as I said, I fell in love with this case. My mom, I think, was probably not really jazzed about the fact that I was so fascinated. But when she saw me reading the book, which I don't remember how I got, I just know I didn't steal it because I'm not like that. But I got a copy of the book and was really fascinated by it and asked questions. And, you know, my mom was really a pretty fantastic mom about answering things like that. But I know...
Well, how old were you again?
12.
And your mom let you read Helter Skelter?
I don't think she let me do anything. I think I got a copy. And I think she was so happy when I was reading anything other than Larry Wilde's joke books. My mother, if you can imagine the 180 of me, polite, quiet, didn't curse, studious. Every other Friday on payday was book day. So or book Friday. She would get her paycheck, and we would go to the bookstore at the Florence Mall in Florence, Kentucky. And I would immediately go to the joke book section, and she would get like the 1,000-page, murder mysteries. And I didn't care about those. Those were boring at the time because those were fiction. But I was really into, the Polish joke book and Irma Bombeck, and all sorts of things anything that made me laugh. But I was fascinated by Charles Manson. Now, imagine a 12-year-old in Independence, Kentucky, reading in 1976 that the group that had been arrested in 1969 and prosecuted in 1970 could potentially be up for parole in 1978. I think we can trace my history of over-worrying back to 1976, when I realized that Charles Manson could get out on parole in 1978 and come directly to Independence, Kentucky, and kill me in my sleep. And I think I began worrying right about that day, if not sooner. But yeah, that was going to happen. So the people who had the most beautiful house that I knew, Danelle, her father was a contractor and built this gorgeous red brick colonial, we'll just call it a mansion, big, beautiful colonial home, hidden way up on a hill, but surrounded by trees, very secluded. And I was at Danelle's house for a sleepover and announced at the dinner table that this was the perfect house for Charles Manson to come and kill everyone, because it was secluded and, they were rich and it was a big house. And I'm sure they were just like, maybe Melissa shouldn't stay over anymore.
This is when you were 12 years
12.
old. This is at the dinner table of your best friend.
We were good friends.
Okay, well, you were. I would imagine that, the parents probably were asking, once you left, that Danelle never invite the seed of Satan over to dinner again.
It could have happened, and my birthday is June 6th, the same as Damien the Omen, but do not draw conclusions. It could have happened, but I did go back. I think Mrs. Childers probably always looked at me with a side eye, but that's okay. I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong. I was just, I was laying down the truth, man.
Yeah,
this is a gorgeous house that Charles Manson would have really dug.
And you found it fascinating.
I did. Now, here's something in my later years I found more fascinating. My connection to Chuck is bizarre and long and deep. He was born in Cincinnati, and I was born 5 minutes from Cincinnati across the Ohio River. He died in California. The day is young, but I might, die today in California. So
let's not do that.
All right, let's not do that. But I live here, and he died about an hour away in Bakersfield, even though he was kept further north at a series of different prisons. But so let's start at the beginning. So Chuck Manson, born in November in Cincinnati of 1924, and died in November of 2017, just a month and a half ago. So his mom was a 16-year-old alcoholic prostitute, and his father's unknown. But his mom married William Manson, and Chuck took his name. And the marriage ended up dissolving. I'm surprised. A 16-year-old alcoholic prostitute with a devil child, and Chuck, William Manson didn't want to take that on. So Chuck is then put in a boys' home. So now let's think about the fact that, I'm taking nothing away from the fact that he had a difficult childhood. Who hasn't? I mean, I think we all have our shit, is my favorite phrase. We have all got our shit. An example, Richard Pryor, born to a prostitute. And he went a different direction. Granted, he had drug issues and set himself on fire while smoking crack. But he lived a good long life and changed the lexicon of how we speak and talk and address different colors of people. And I mean, there's a way you can go. And granted, maybe Richard Pryor's chips in his brain were better arranged, but Chuck went just in a really different direction. So from the time of being a small kid, he was in trouble for petty crimes and small thefts, and the probation reports on him that are not sealed, because a lot of things involving him are now sealed, were marked that he suffered from a large degree of rejection, instability, and psychic trauma, constantly striving for status and securing some kind of love. which I think explains why he had his family around him, his made-up fake family of killers. And other descriptions included like unpredictable and safe only under supervision, which I think might be a big clue, and that's where he probably should have just stayed under supervision. But in 1958, he was in and out of jail for a variety of offenses, including, check fraud, forgery, pimping. And he was sent to McNeil Island Prison in Washington State for 10 years. And it was while he was there that he learned to read music and play the guitar, which is how he caught the ear of Brian Wilson and his amazing songs that they recorded. Not really. So he was not only influenced by drugs, he loved LSD. I think you could probably figure that out by some of his press conferences and the way he spoke. But he was also fascinated by different artwork, the music of the time, especially the Beatles song Helter Skelter. And he really felt that they were talking to him, directly to him.
Didn't he try to get a record deal too?
He actually did. The Beach Boys recorded one of his songs as a B-side to something. He actually did. I don't know if he gets he probably gets some sort of tiny royalty or something. And they sang it on the Mike Douglas show. They renamed it. Yeah, they renamed the song. It was a song about like sadness and love, and go figure. And sang it on the Mike Douglas show, and it was the B-side of I do not know what the A-side was, but I don't really care because I don't care about the Beach Boys. So he had a strong belief in Armageddon, especially the Book of Revelations, and he really investigated a lot of different religions. So like Scientology, obscure cults, and even the Church of the Final Judgment. So he was a little bit like L. Ron Hubbard in that he thought, the best way to make some money is to be kind of a leader. So in 1967, he gets out of prison and he makes his way from Washington to California. And he kind of picks up, stragglers and hippies along the way. It's that time of the world where that could, kind of happen. So he convinces this group of assholes that they have to start massacring the rich and famous to get attention to their cause. They'll bring about a race war because they were going to blame all of the killings on black people rising up to kill rich whiteys. And that then when the blacks take over, they won't know what to do because he's very racist and thought that blacks were not intelligent. And they would elect him the ruler of the black nation because they would want his mentorship. So I think you can see it's a really well thought out, well planned.
I can see. I was diagramming that all out here on the wall while you were.
It's beautiful, like a tree, like a down here, and this goes here. And
I hope you don't mind. I didn't have anything, so I just used a razor blade to carve it into the wall.
Totally fine.
All right.
I have wanted to paint that office for a while, and now we have a really good reason to do that. Don't use a red razor blade. Red is so hard to paint over. It just looks like scratches.
It's just plain. It's just scratch.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So he and his group of merry men and women get arrested at the Spahn Ranch on charges of auto theft. And then it starts to come out. Much like Al Capone getting arrested for taxes, Charles Manson gets arrested for auto theft. So it starts to come out a little bit at a time. Susan Atkins seems to have the biggest mouth and says, to fellow prisoners, Virginia Graham, and there was another woman who told one of the guards and said, hey, you know what? I really wanted to cut Sharon Tate's baby out of her stomach, but I didn't have the time. And her, Sally is like, really? Yeah, of course. Who wouldn't want a pretty blonde
guard?
Yeah. Clink, clink, clink. Here's my metal cup on the... So she then started to reveal more, grisly facts about what happened. And it was clear she couldn't know what was happening unless she was there. And then she explained that they were going to perpetuate this list of, like horrible things against this list of high-profile people like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, Frank Sinatra, Steve McQueen, Tom Jones, and Marty Feldman. All right, I added Marty Feldman.
I was going to say, I don't think Marty was on that list.
It was a joke. Oh, my God. Okay, so she explained that they really needed to kill these people so that the world would take notice. So the trial, when they finally piece it together, begins in June of 1970. And his first attorney is Ronald Hughes. And he was named his attorney. And he kind of figures out quickly that he can defend Leslie Van Houten, but not so much Charles Manson. And he wanted Leslie Van Houten to know that I can get you off saying that you were influenced by him, but I can't do anything for him. So he drops Manson as a client. And he gets another attorney who, Vincent Bugliosi, the DA, actually revered and said, the press focused on his, pompous, bombastic behavior, but he was a great attorney and defended Charles Manson as if he were defending himself. But his first attorney, Ronald Hughes, it didn't really go well. After he dropped Charles, I feel like you just don't drop Charles Manson as a client, because after that he went camping and disappeared, and his decomposed body came up a couple months later, and they think it's the first of the retaliation killings by the Manson family.
I did not know that story.
Yeah, it's a good one. My other favorite one is that while in custody and during the trial, he applied for Charles Manson applied for a Union 76 credit card.
Well, back then you could get Dodger tickets with those.
That may have been his sole purpose, because I'm going to say he didn't do a really great job of filling out the form. He has his name, he has his age, number of dependents 16, which is kind of funny. His address 441 North Beauchat Street, which is the address of the LA County Sheriff's Department.
Right.
So he has his social security number, his previous address, the Spawn Ranch in Chatsworth. This is funny. The previous employers scratched out, just like he has no, previous employers, just scratched out. His job is listed as evangelist, and the type of business is called religious.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, you got to give the guy credit for just the balls to do that.
Yeah, and his previous address is the Spawn Ranch, and the name of the business at the address, a joint venture. I don't know if that's a funny pot reference.
Is that what he really?
Yes, he did. It's right here in front of me. I'm reading it. Now, here's the thing: they didn't explain whether he actually got the card, but if he did. I don't know what he would really need a gas card for, but he did apply for it. He actually did a lot of artwork during the trial too. And, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's, he had some artistic talent somewhere. It just was covered by, maniacal leanings toward being, a guru who's an asshole. So he spends, he gets convicted, as if anyone doesn't know. He also is given the death penalty, as if anyone doesn't know. A few years later, California abolishes the death penalty, so then he's, commuted to life in prison, which is heartbreaking, because he didn't deserve to live. So he spends 50 years between San Quentin, Corcoran, and eventually Pelican State Prison in Central California. They move him after they discover that he's trafficking drugs. And then he was attacked, actually, by another prisoner, Jan Holstrom, who poured paint thinner all over him and set him on fire because he made fun of Holstrom's Hare Krishna chants.
Oh, my God. When was this?
Oh gosh, I don't have the date. I'm sorry.
But it was not recent. It was
no. It was in like the 2000s.
So this is the first I've heard of this.
Yeah, it was in the I started to say 2003, but I could be wrong. I don't remember the exact date, but I'll find that for you. Let me mark that down. Hold on.
That's okay.
Click.
Yeah.
So you just want your pipe down in there, sunshine. So to me it's odd that someone would set someone on fire. Because they didn't like their Hare Krishna chants, because I don't think his song that the Beach Boys recorded was really that good either. So maybe he really shouldn't have made fun of the guy. Hare Krishna chants aren't great, but neither is his song. So in the full circle, he, at some point a few years before he dies, a very young girl, beautiful, like her name was Amber something, and then she ends up changing it. I will only be known as Starshine. Says that they're engaged. He's 80 something at the time, and he's 80 and she's 24, and we're going to get married, and I love him. And it turns out that she wants him to die so that she can parade his body around and get money. So they probably should have gotten together. They belong together, But they didn't actually get married. That didn't happen. But coming around to the circle of how Chuck's Homey, he had a follower, and his name was Michael Channels, and he lives 10 minutes from where I live now in Santa Clarita. And he was sounds like a real social, fantastic human. Not at all. Who collected autographs and pictures. So he began writing Charles Manson in the early 1990s. He was asking for an autograph. He wanted to add it to his collection of, and get this, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and Michael Jackson. Because I think if you've got Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and Michael Jackson, your next step is obviously Charles Manson.
It all makes sense.
It does.
It's like one of those questions when you're taking, the SAT, how do these things connect? What's next in order?
Right. The answer would have to be Charles Manson after Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and Michael Jackson. So he wrote 50 letters to the Kern County Prison before Manson actually wrote back. So they connected over their wonderful correspondence to inmate number 78520. And then they started phone calls. And by 2002, they actually agreed to meet. So there are several pictures online of Michael Channels and Charles Manson looking like just lifelong buds. It's just the sweetest thing. I'm surprised Michael Channels has not carved into his head an X, which was the original carving, because Manson said, I'm Xing myself out of your world, and then later changed to the swastika, because it's like, he liked the little tails on the end, or I don't really know, but I'm surprised Michael Channels doesn't have that. Over the years, Michael Channels has said that he has transferred more than $6,000 to Charles Manson to cover medical expenses and everything, other things in prison, the things you need to pay for, like your crank and your cell phones that are, yeah. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Once he was almost in tears because someone stole his dentures and he couldn't eat the things he liked. Michael Channels said, so I bought him new dentures and they cost $600.
Oh, God.
So it's such a bummer to think that Charles Manson's dentures were stolen, unlike Sharon Tate's life and child, and that he couldn't have corn on the cob. That is a fucking bummer that Chuck had to go without, pork chops until new dentures arrived, courtesy of Michael Channels. So in return, Manson gave Channels some personal belongings like photos, a handmade Halloween mask. I'm guessing it wasn't like a Hello Kitty. I don't know what it was. I can't imagine a Charles Manson handmade Halloween mask. I bet it's awesome. And then a few months after their meeting in 2002, Michael Channels said he got a letter from Manson, and it was his will, bequeathing everything, all of his belongings, his rights, his body. And Michael Channels, who has, brought this upon himself, is like, this has turned into something I never expected. It's a nightmare all the way around. Well, tough noogies, Mike. You decide to worship and become friends with Charles Manson, and it just harshes your buzz that you get his will. Well, fuck and you. So he Michael Channels has in his home a shrine, the Manson shrine. He has like a Confederate flag. I don't know what that's about. He has, all of his pictures. It looks like the lair of a nut that you would see on, what's it called? Murderous Minds or something?
Criminal Minds. That they would stumble upon
Yes.
the temple just before they caught him
Yes.
almost murdering somebody.
Yes. He has the outlines on the floor of how Sharon Tate fell and was laying in front of her couch. You can lay down in it. There are pictures of like just the most grossest hillbilly biker mamas with no teeth and long gray hair laying in jean shorts with bedazzled with sequins.
Oh my God!
Laying on the floor in his garage or wherever this room of worship is, in the shape of how Sharon Tate fell. It's really attractive.
Does he charge admission for this?
See, that's an interesting thing. I don't know. It's all very secret and quiet, and I'm sure you probably have to belong to some, retarded Facebook group of like, hey, I eat my own baby's head .com or whatever, and then you find him and you get to go. It's very small, secret groups. I don't know if he charges admission. I don't really care. I don't care at all. So poor Mike has, is fighting in court, actually, the only living, supposed living grandson of Charles Manson, who lives in Bradenton, Florida, for his body and for, more importantly, all of his belongings, so he can, sell them and potentially retire from his job at, Fuckville or whatever it is he does, the horrible human does, probably at a meat rendering plant or some crazy. Anyway, so poor Mike is like, cemeteries don't want him. They think if they take him, they'll pollute the whole ground. So I'm just going to cremate him and dump his ashes in the desert. So the next time you're camping...
Wait a minute, that's what this guy,
Michael
Channels says. Yeah, okay.
So the next time you're camping in the desert, campers, what if you're like, some dust blows up and goes into your nose and your mouth and it's Charles Manson? I just want you to think about that. I'm not saying you shouldn't go outside, but you probably shouldn't go outside. So Manson's grandson, Jason Freeman, is the 41-year-old last living relative. There was a Charles Manson Jr. who changed his name to like Bob Smith and then ended up killing himself in 1991. But he has this grandson, and he is trying to fight Michael Channels for the remains of his grandfather, Charles Manson. So he died in November of this year, of last year. Oh, it's 2018 now. And there is a hearing set in a week, January 8th, in Los Angeles County Superior Court to hear the case and whether Jason Freeman can get his grandpa. Hey, Grandpa, can I have your remains and your awesome drawings and your handmade Halloween mask of Hello Kitty?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. So here's Michael Channels, 10 minutes from my house. Chuck Manson, born 10 minutes from my birth house. I'm hoping that's the only connection we have. That's all.
Oh, my God.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
So if you have any amazing tips that you need me to know about, please feel free to email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. And more cowbell.
And don't forget, if you've got a tip on any kind of murder or mayhem, if you got a tip on a new yoga pose, if you've got a tip on anything that you think Melissa might want to read or find out more about, send us a line via email at jttipsters@gmail.com.